Then it dawned on her 27-year-old self, she'd bloody well earned her bragging rights. And what were these events if not to show off and tell everyone how well you've done for yourself? And to have pissing contests about who'd achieved the most amazing thing since leaving school. And let's face it, I've done pretty bloody well. After graduating from university with a first-class degree in journalism, she'd landed her job as one half of the travel writing team at one of the UK's top mags, based in central London. Her opposite, Dylan, was the adventure and outdoors writer, a job that she couldn't imagine doing for all the tea in China. She'd finally got to travel the world, and not only that, she'd stayed in many of the top hotels too. She had so much of the world left to see, and she was excited to discover where her job might take her next. Maybe the reunion would be a great way to stick two fingers up at the so-called popular kids, many of whom, she'd expected, had amounted to a great big nada. It wasn't the best reason to go, but it was a reason. She resolved to think about it. She had Miami to focus on. And so that was it. The invitation remained on the mantelshelf above her modern, state-of-the-art feature electric fire, while she went off to write about the city at the southern tip of the Sunshine State. The flat always felt chilly and impersonal when she arrived home after a trip. And seeing as the sojourns were becoming more frequent, she had pondered finding a lodger. She had been with Josh, her boyfriend, for around a year now, and even though he was wonderful, it felt a little too soon to be thinking about asking him to move in. And there was no way the two of them would fit into his rented studio flat for longer than a weekend at a time. But coming home to an empty apartment was a little depressing, and having someone around might just make things better. Instead of humming Eric Carmen's All By Myself, like Bridget Jones, she'd feel inclined to hum something happier, and at least it would mean the place wouldn't feel quite so lifeless and cold. Her obvious choice of housemate was no longer a possibility, seeing as Shelley had recently moved in with her boyfriend. Zara had been so lucky to find her place, and at such a great price too. It was an ex-local authority block, which wasn't much to look at from the outside, but inside it was spacious and bright, with an open-plan layout, thanks to the changes she'd made. She'd wielded a sledgehammer on more than one occasion, under the strict supervision of her dad, Carl, who was fortunately a builder by trade. It had taken quite a bit of refurbishment, and there was still plenty to do, another problem with being away so much. But her dad always insisted on working on the place whilst she was away. Now it was beginning to look every bit the modern, independent woman's bolt hole that she'd hoped for. To make matters even better, estate agents had recently valued it at around 50 grand more than she'd paid, so she knew she was on the right track as far as her investment was concerned. Living alone wasn't something she'd slipped into easily. Coming from a family of 3 kids, 2 dogs and 2 parents, all crammed into a 3-bedroom local authority house in New Malden, meant that the peace and quiet of her new place was somewhat alien. Her mother, Suze, was obsessed with the royal family, and every royal celebration, of which there seemed to be many, meant bunting and flags and neighbours round for frequent parties, increasing the occupants of their relatively small home tenfold. Royal memorabilia covered every possible surface and every event that had occurred since Suze had been a child herself, and Carl was incredible to put up with it, so Zara thought. He would often come home from working at some old lady's house with a token that he had been given for his collector wife. Andrew, Zara's older brother, had followed in the footsteps of her father and was now working with him, and even though he had moved into a rented flat with his pregnant girlfriend, they seemed to spend every spare minute in the family home, whilst her younger brother, William, a latecomer to the family, was on the verge of leaving high school and trying to figure out what to do with his life. He had a tendency to play his music too loud, which hadn't been conducive to study or work when Zara was at home. The quiet at her own place was sometimes welcome, and she often tried to convince herself that living alone was a breath of fresh air. But in reality, she knew that there was no air quite like that of the cake aroma-filled stuff she inhaled when she visited her family. As she wheeled her case from the entrance along the hardwood floor towards her bedroom, she tried to think of possible flat share options. She knew there were a couple of new starters at the office in the fashion department, so perhaps that would be a good starting point. She would weigh up the pros and cons when she had more energy, but right now